Hello, everyone, and welcome into the 20th episode of Jack's Mailbag, the series where I answer your Gamecock athletics questions. If you have a question you want answered on the next episode, be sure to drop a comment in the comments section below on this YouTube video, or I'll have a post on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com where you can ask any and all of your questions. This week, we're going to be talking a little bit about college baseball, the greater landscape of it, with one move that was made, and we'll talk a little bit of South Carolina baseball as well. And we'll also talk some men's basketball as summer workouts are in the thick of things. But without further ado, let's get into our first question of the week from Argit, who asks, who's going to be the Texas coach? So at the time when this question was asked, I'm recording this on Friday night. So when y'all see this, it will be Saturday morning roughly. And this question was asked on Tuesday. And Texas A&M and Tennessee had just played in the College World Series, I believe one night earlier, and Tennessee won 2 out of 3 games in the College World Series to win their first national championship in program history. And on that same day, Texas had fired their coach and had a job opening. And I'll let the video kind of speak for itself, but Texas A&M head coach Jim Schlossnagle was getting tied to this rumor that he might become the next head coach at Texas. And right after the national championship, after losing the title game, the Aggies head coach was asked about the future for him.
Coach, with respect to the difficult outcome tonight, but with the rumors circulating today about a specific job opening, what do you have to say about your future in Aggie land?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty selfish of you to ask me that question, to be honest with you. But I left my family to be the coach at Texas A&M. I took the job at Texas A&M to never take another job again, and that hasn't changed in my mind. That's unfair to talk about something like that. That'd be like you asking Montgomery if he's going to sign in the draft. But I understand you got to ask the question, but I gave up a big part of my life to come take this job, and I've poured every ounce of my soul in this job, and I've given this job every single ounce I can possibly give it. So write that.
Coach, thank you very much.
All right, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. So I'll try to break this down piece by piece. First off, I've seen a lot of people in the wake of that video and the interview and the press conference talking about how the reporter there is in the wrong and he shouldn't have asked that question right after the national championship, and he's at fault here, and there's no reason why Schloss shouldn't have gotten mad there. All right, I get that, but from a fan's perspective. But as a journalist, we're supposed to be asking these types of questions, right? Like, if the rumor's out there that, Schloss is tied to potentially becoming Texas head coach, you're going to ask that question. And some are going to think, oh, well, he can just ask, the reporter could just ask it at any other time, not tonight. Well, that's not exactly how it works. There's no guarantee that as it played out, there's no guarantee that the guy's going to be able to ask that question again, because one, there's a lot of reasons for this. Number one, he could take the job next day, which, of course, as we'll get into, Schloss did take the job at Texas. You could also think of it this way, like, Texas A&M, they don't have to do a end of the year press conference like some programs do. South Carolina didn't do one, obviously because Mark Kingston got fired the day after the season ended. But I know Clemson did a end of the year type of press conference with a few of the players and baggage at Clemson there. So it's not always guaranteed. And I think in the moment you have to ask that question and you have to get on the record. It's just like when Kingston was asked, do you feel like you have the support of the administration? It's a question you have to ask and you have to get it on the record. So I do not blame the reporter one bit. And as we'll talk about here in a second, you'll see why he wasn't at fault. And a lot of people kind of have switched sides on it. So the day after Texas A&M loses in the national championship game, they get back to College Station, and about an hour after that, I believe, it becomes official that Schloss has been named the head coach at Texas. And a lot of people thought, me personally, I think it's kind of a scummy move. I don't even know how to really put it, to be honest. It's kind of a move that I get why he's doing it, but at the same time, it's like the timing of it was awful with everything that had happened. And of course, in his introductory press conference, like a day after being named the head coach of Texas, He goes ahead and apologizes to the reporter for saying what he did. It was such an outlandish way to answer the question too. Like all he had to say was, "Yeah, you know what? Next question. I don't want to talk about anything else besides the national championship right now, and I'll talk about my future at a later date." That's all he had to do. But of course, he, poked the bear, and that was the wrong thing to do, in my opinion, at least. I think the way he answered that question could have been handled so much better, and it felt like such a scripted type of apology too. And I don't know. I just think it's just a kind of bad move. And yeah, I mean, look, the reporters, the reporter got the bad end of the stick in this situation where he gets criticized for asking a fair question and takes a lot of heat. And then obviously, it was the question that had to be asked. And of course, got a good answer. The answer that just showed that Schloss is off to Texas. So, in the grand scheme of things, the move itself on its own is fine, I guess. It leaves Texas A&M in kind of a bad spot because now they got to replace their entire coaching staff. Who knows what players are going to be sticking around? I've seen so many of their big guys enter the portal and stuff, and I don't know. I think these guys have to enter the portal because again, it closes on July 2nd, so you want that like safety net, I guess. But if A&M is going to move swiftly here and hire a new coach and it's the right guy, a lot of these guys that are in the portal could just decide to take their name out and come back to A&M. And hopefully the Aggies get a good coach here and they're able to get back to the top. I would love to see A&M beat Texas next season. That's going to be like, we're talking about early season college baseball matchups that I'm already glued to. The fact that Texas is joining the SEC next year is going to be good in of itself. But the fact that, A&M and Texas maybe I don't know what the schedule looks like for next year, but let's say they're playing next year and it's in College Station. That's my number one like series of the year that I will be paying attention to outside of South Carolina, of course. But very long answer. And look, I think Schloss was in the wrong and glad he apologized. But again, too little too late, in my opinion. Next question comes from Kitchen Labs, who asks, which of the baseball candidates would have taken the job if offered? So I think it's hard to really tell specifically, but based off the candidates that Gamecock Central and many other outlets have reported on, I would have thought Monty Lee would have said yes to the job. Landon Powell, if offered, would have said yes. I don't think Cliff Godwin would have said yes. Tom Walter, I believe, would have said yes. Pollard, I don't think would have said yes. And I'm trying to think who else. I think those are the main ones that probably would have said yes. Other than that, I feel like most guys would have said no, especially Godwin, just because he's an ECU alum and stuff. And he apparently has been holding out for that Ole Miss job for some time now. So definitely those 3 to 4 guys I would say would have said yes to the job. West Ashley Gamecock asks, do you have any early thoughts on men's basketball this season? Where do you think we will be ranked preseason in the SEC? I don't know exactly yet. I'll get into the men's basketball mindset here at some point after this video is recorded and published and stuff. Men's basketball, Lamont Paris will be having a press conference on Monday, July 1st. Which I believe will be 3 weeks into the summer workout season, and he'll provide some updates. So be sure to stay tuned to Gamecock Central for all coverage on that. But kind of getting back to the question, in the grand scheme of things, I don't know exactly where South Carolina will be ranked. I can tell you I'm sure a lot of people are going to count them out again. I think that's kind of where this is heading. And I would say probably middle of the pack in the SEC. If it's me, I'm saying maybe like 5th or 6th in the SEC next season, preseason ranking wise. They're not going to be 14 or I guess in this case 16. But I definitely think top 6 or 7 would probably be about where I see them. Now, in terms of early thoughts, I don't know if they're going to be better than last year. It's hard to be when you broke a program record with 26 wins and you had a great year. You made the NCAA tournament. I do think they have a good enough roster to get back to the tournament. I mean, you got Nick Pringle, Jamari Thomas, Jordan Butler. You got Cam Scott coming in. Who knows how much he'll play. You got a good-looking roster, in my opinion, next year. You obviously have some returning guys, too. You lost some other guys, but I do think this team is good enough to get back to the tournament. And in my opinion, they have to. Otherwise, anything short of making the tournament next year is not good enough. And when you see how much of strides Lamont made from year one to year two, the bar is kind of raised. And I kind of compare it to football a little bit when Shane Beamer really exceeded expectations in his first 2 years at South Carolina. He makes the bowl game and wins it in year one, 7 wins, great season. That's a huge turnaround from winning 2 games under Will Muschamp in 2020. And then in 22, they obviously get 8 wins and make the Gator Bowl, and they have 2 upset wins over top 10 teams in back-to-back weeks. So the bar was really high, and then in year 3 last season, they win 5 games. So my point is, you don't want to take a step backwards. It's kind of it is a similar situation. And if South Carolina does get back to the tournament again next year, I think that's a win in my book. Obviously, you want to go further, but I do think getting to the tournament every year for a program that has never won a national championship in men's college basketball should always be the goal. But beyond that, I think next year they got to make it to the round of 32, try to make it to the Sweet 16. I think the Sweet 16 is the sweet spot, no pun intended, for where I think they could potentially go. But again, it's going to really depend on how these pieces click. Everything kind of just worked so well together last year. It really did all come together with all the transfers they brought in, and it's going to be hard to replicate the type of talent they were able to bring in, but never say never. And our final question comes from Hutto Cum. Sorry if I butchered that. Hutto KM, I guess. Any word on how the evaluations are going with our players / recruits at the baseball combines? Any feedback that would lead you to believe that some may come back, enter school? So I don't have like official stats. I've been looking and really haven't found anything concrete. However, I can share some numbers and stuff in the latest MLB draft prospect rankings that I can find. So going down the list here, PJ Morlando from Somerville High School is the 31st best prospect out of 400. Cole Messina is 85. Eli Jersenbeck is 281. Roman Kimball's actually right behind him at 284. Carson Messina, Cole's younger brother, is 392. And Kennedy Jones, who was not at the combine, did not get invited, is 467. And Kennedy's coming back next year. Can confirm that. I do think Cole Messina is going to the draft. I think that is kind of clear at this point. His stock is very high. And the latest ESPN mock drafts I saw, Cole was a second-round pick to the Brewers, I think at number 67 overall, and that's about $1 million signing right there. So too hard to turn down. Plus, he made an Instagram post earlier in the week kind of thanking South Carolina baseball for all that has been done in the last 3 years. So I think he's going to the draft. I think Carson and PJ will also go. You could also see guys like Bo Hollins and Brandon Clark come to Carolina next year. I definitely think that's a real possibility. And I do think guys like Eli Jones and Roman Kimball will also come back. Jersenbeck's an interesting one. And I actually met with Paul Maneri on Thursday and actually asked him a little bit about this. And here's what he kind of had to say. There's a quote, "He's the kind of kid that's capable of being a difference maker on your staff. I honestly believe in my heart that he wants to be here next year and prove himself. And then the following year, I think he'll be in really good status for the draft. Selfishly, I'm hoping that he wants to be here for next year. And if he is, I think he'll have a vital role on our team." So I don't know whether or not Jersey is going to be coming back. I do think he should, but will he? It depends on where he's drafted. There are only 10 rounds in the MLB draft, and that's about 3 weeks away now. So it's possible that he gets drafted, but it's gonna depend on how high he's drafted. If he's like a top, 5-round pick in the draft, and the money's good enough, then I think he leaves. I do think he would be much wiser to stay because he's got Friday night ace potential and has shown that he could pitch really well on the big stage. When he was in his first year at Carolina, definitely got some good innings in before Tommy John, then got hurt, and he missed all last year, didn't throw out the combine, according to Maneri. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I do think if his projections are just not where he wants them to be, what's the harm in coming back to school for another year? Because you also have to think about it this way. He hasn't pitched since 2023. So his first action back, let's say he goes to the MLB draft and likes where he's picked at and he goes pro ball route. His first action back will be at the minor league level. And the minors are so much different from college baseball. And I feel like coming back to school, playing in fall ball, pitching there, getting your rehab in, then pitching in the winter, going into spring ball, and then once the season starts, build him up to where he can be that Friday night guy again. Kind of like what you did with Kimball this past season versus the MLB draft route, where who knows if he'll even pitch this year, to be honest. And then he gets a fresh start in minor league spring training, I'm guessing, and then starts out at rookie level, high A, low A, whatever the case might be. And the hitters are much better there. So it's a kind of tricky situation, but I think it ultimately does come down to money at the end of the day. But it's like NIL exists, so he can definitely make some money here if he wants. But it's definitely nowhere near on the level as what he would be making potentially if he's a high pick in the MLB draft, which I don't know. I think teams are definitely going to take him just because of what he's done in the past. But again, he hasn't pitched since 2023. So I don't think any team, if he hadn't gotten hurt and he pitched this whole season, we're talking about him probably being a top 3-round pick. That's just my opinion, and it would be a no-brainer for him to go. But because he hasn't pitched in a year and a half or so, I think he comes back next year. That's just my opinion. And obviously, Maneri and a lot of Gamecock fans are kind of hoping he's going to come back next year. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. Only a few questions, but nothing crazy. Hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of Jack's Mailbag. Update, there will be no episode next week during 4th of July. I am taking a much-needed vacation. I'm going to Florida for a week, so I'm going to be out of town for the 4th while I also celebrate my 24th birthday, which will be super exciting. And, yeah, I'm feeling a little older, man. I'm counting down the days. It's less than a week until I turn 24, so enjoying my final days of being 23 years old and still feeling young and stuff. And another year until my brain's fully developed, I guess. But, yeah, so we'll probably have another episode of Jack's Mailbag in roughly 2 weeks or so. And by then, we'll be starting to talk a little bit more of football. We'll talk a little bit of the draft, I'm sure, by then, and how the rounds went for those former Gamecocks that are looking to turn pro in the MLB. So, again, that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you have any questions you want answered on the next week's episode in about 2 weeks or so, be sure to drop a comment on this YouTube video, or I'll have a post on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Happy 4th of July, everyone, and have a good one.